If you read the abstract, you know this one. Today I'm going to talk about cloud development environments and how they are strategic assets. We'll go through a few things. So just a raise of hands. Has anybody here deployed a cloud development environment at all? Not you guys, but you have? Okay. Are you guys familiar with what they are? Yes? Okay, one, and a couple people just are completely not familiar with them. Okay. In a sense, yeah. The IDE is a component of a cloud development environment, but yeah, we'll get into it. I mean, I have a couple slides that talk about what they are, and the strategic benefits is the main part of it. But we'll have a bit of an intro. So we have a timeline. Actually, let me just set a timer here real quick so I don't go over. Okay, so basic timeline from, before this little hash in the middle or towards the left side, that's going to represent day zero of when a dev starts on, start first day on their job, first day on your project, whatever it is. So before they start their work, you have their hardware provision, you get all their authorization and authentication set up and everything. They start, it's day zero, and then they are handed essentially a treasure map, maybe half of a treasure map. There's a corner torn off. They have to go dig around. Maybe it's like the Goonies over here. We were talking about that earlier. They are on basically a treasure hunt that's a circle of discussions and dead ends and telephone calls and who knows what it is to get their environment set up, right? How many wikis are they reading? How many IMs or how many DMs is it? How many emails is it? How many security requests? Who knows, right? Then at some point in the future, they've reached their goal and they have a fully configured development environment and they can commit code into the repo. So what if we could cut that middle part out? Before the dev starts, we do the same motions. We provision the hardware, set up all their auth, day zero for this dev, and then immediately they're at that target. It eliminates all this friction in the middle of them having to hunt down everything that they need to do their work. And that's what a CDE is. So if you take nothing else away from today but these three things, CDEs are a way to enhance productivity. They ease compliance and improve security at the same time. So you can reduce developer friction and have a safer environment and a safer product from that. And ultimately allows you to ship your code faster at scale, right? If you're a small, very agile shop, shipping code fast is not a problem. But if you're a big shop and you're constantly hiring people, you're bringing in contractors, maybe you're offshoring some stuff, shipping that fast at scale can be an issue. So today, the agenda, we'll talk about Coder, the company. We are a company. We do have employees and we do make money, but we're not. This isn't a pitch, right? But we'll talk about the company a little bit. Then we'll talk about what is a CDE, what the developer experience with a CDE is like. Then we'll talk a little bit about security and compliance, and then we'll get into the meat of it, and that is the CDE maturity model and the developer golden path and how they're intertwined. Then I'll have some resources for you, and then we can do some Q&A. So Coder, the company, we've been around since 2017. We're still funded. We're in a Series B2 right now. We're finding great success in the Fortune 500 and government and things like that who are purchasing our product. But we also have a lot of small projects, using our community edition. And our thing is to keep developers in flow, right? That's our mission, period. These are some of the companies that are sort of our marquee logos. You can see there's some pretty big companies on here, some pretty security conscious organizations as well. We also have some government agencies too that are our customers that we can't really name. But suffice to say, it's a really secure way to develop. And we are an open source first company. All of our stuff is open source, period. Even the premium features in our product, you can see the source code for them. We have 125 repos in our GitHub right now, and most of those are related to our flagship product, which is called Coder. We have an aggregate of about 95,000 stars across all of our repos, and we're shooting for 100,000. We hope to get there pretty soon. And we have a really active community as well. We have over 3,000 people on our Discord server. So even if you are using our open source community version, you'll still be able to get some decent support and have some help there. So what is a CDE? It's a way to abstract everything a dev needs away from their laptop and put it up in the cloud. So it gives you, it's a predefined workspace that's decoupled from your machine. It's in a cloud somewhere. That cloud can be on-prem, it can be public. It doesn't even technically have to be a cloud. You know, we release OS packages for, we release RPMs, Debs, Alpine packages, so you could install it on a server if you wanted. But we typically just say cloud, just to gloss over all that. And the CDE provides a comprehensive set of tooling, right? It's all the compilers, the libraries, the IDE, everything. It's all prepackaged and declared in this workspace. And it also provides the compute resources as well. If you think about in Kubernetes, for example, you could define a workspace as a deployment that pulls a certain image. At runtime, it installs a certain extra packages. Maybe it downloads the developer's .dot files from GitHub, and it defines what node that it's going to land on, and how much CPU, RAM, GPU cores, whatever that developer is going to get. So that's what we mean by it defines all the high-performance resources. It's like infrastructure as code for a workstation, basically. So we all know how devs code today. They have either they're working on their laptop, or they're working on some kind of VDI, or maybe there's some shadow IT VM out there that people are logging into, and who knows? There's problems with all those things, and I won't go into all the detail on that. I'm sure you've seen those problems happen more than once over the course of your career. And then eventually they push all their code up into a CI/CD, and then it gets deployed at some point somewhere. The thing is here, everybody's writing cloud-native software nowadays, but the developer experience is still on a laptop, on a VDI, or on some random VM. There's no real integration with the cloud flow. With a CDE, you're removing all that tooling and more importantly, all the source code off of the developer's device, and you're moving it up into a cloud instance, and they're just going to access that with their IDE. And that could be a browser-based IDE or any local IDE that can do a remote connection. And you see that the CDE gets moved up there with the CI/CD and the deployment flows. So an ideal CDE, it's going to be standardized and reproducible, meaning that every developer workspace is going to be declarative, right? So that means that every developer who starts up a workspace from that same declaration is going to get the exact same tooling, the exact same hardware that their coworkers are getting. Everybody's going to get the exact tooling that they need to build the product. You're not going to have any, somebody using an old version of a library that causes a regression or whatever. It's secure, it's scalable, and it's stable above all things, right? And by stability, we not only the platform stability, but that stability of every dev getting the same thing. Therefore, the product that you ship is going to be a lot more stable, a lot more secure. And ideally, it should follow open standards and be able to integrate with your enterprise. When you have a developer platform, the last thing you want to do is have to recreate a wheel or have to certify some new way of doing something that you're already done certifying. Like say authentication for some reason, right? You already have OIDC, you already have a SAML, whatever it is. You want to be able to use that instead of having some other method. But you can think about all the other systems that you integrate with. Your CD should be able to integrate with those as well. So the DevX, when using a CDE, it's pretty straightforward. Like I said, their environments are pre-configured. Ideally, it's a declarative template. It's not anything binary or anything like that. So, it's human readable. You can modify it. You can keep it in the declaration in source control itself. Something that's pretty straightforward. So they spin it up, they connect to it, and they start coding. Just like that initial slide I had with the map and the second developer starting up on day 0, being able to commit code. So, like I said, this is not a pitch, but I am going to show you some screens from Coder just to give you the idea of what a CDE can look like. When the dev logs in, this is what they see, right? There's no desktop, there's no command line that they're connecting to or anything like that. It's just a web UI, and they have a couple of workspaces there running. So they'll go in, they'll click into one of the web spaces, and now it'll give them the options to connect. This guy can connect with VS Code Desktop, with Code Server, which is another one of our open source projects. It's an implementation of VS Code that runs in a web browser. Or they can just connect with a web terminal. Now, like I said, any IDE that you can do a remote connection with, you can connect with Coder, and then any web-based IDE will work as well. So basically, they click on that VS Code Desktop. This pops up. It's a separate window from the normal VS Code that they're running. It installs an agent, and that agent connects to the control plane and then negotiates with the control plane and the workspace on the back end to get a peer-to-peer connection, and away they go. So it's really straightforward. It's really simple. The devs don't have to have a big fancy computer. They could use, anything with a Chrome browser will work. They could even do it on an iPad if they wanted. Right? If they obviously won't be able to run local VS Code on an iPad, but they could use the web-based one if they wanted. So the way that these can improve DevX and productivity, like I said, they can access from anywhere on any device. As I said, they don't have to have a specialized workstation. Any laptop will do. They can commit their code on their day 0. We have one fintech company that had a 3-week onboarding process, and now the very first step in their developer onboarding guide is log into Coder and create a commit in like the hello file, right? So they log in, they got all the tooling, they're connected to the repo, they have everything they need, and they're ready to go. And it also provides that consistent, pre-configured environment. Everybody gets the same thing. Everybody gets all the tooling they need, nothing more, nothing less. The lowest hanging fruit with a CDE, and if you can just achieve this, you're going to save time, you're going to save money. But there's a lot more to it beyond this, but this is the lowest hanging fruit. If you look at the top line, a dev's got meetings, configuration, and that means configuring their environment or their machine somehow, keeping that in compliance, and then code reviews, code maintenance, testing, whatever. And then they have this small little slice on the end where they're actually coding, right? Some bigger companies, the devs are only coding like 10% of the time, right? If they're lucky. With a CDE, if you can just cut out that configuration and compliance and just leave them with their meetings, their code reviews, maintenance, and testing, that's just more time they get to spend coding. Is it double? Maybe, maybe not. But this is just a really simplified view of it. So the bottom line with DevX, when you're talking about a CDE, more time to code, right? It's that simple. The more time the devs have to code, the happier they're going to be. The happier they're going to be, the less they're going to churn. We've had some clients say they've spent all this money recruiting people from top schools, and it takes them 6 weeks before they can even commit a line of code, and the guys walk out the door because they're bored after 3 weeks. They want to be writing code. They don't want to be filling out security requests and things like that. And it just accelerates time to market. So these are pretty straightforward, pretty easy to understand. Security and compliance, we'll talk about this for just a few slides really quick. Lost productivity isn't the only risk, is what we say. There's code exfiltration vectors all over the place, especially when you're dealing with contractors. A laptop gets stolen. Is the hard drive encrypted? You hope so, but maybe it's not. Who knows? If the devs are configuring their own desktops, their own laptops, who knows what they're doing. Somebody gets up, walks away from a coffee shop, walks from the table to a coffee shop, somebody snags a laptop with an unlocked screen. It doesn't matter if that thing is encrypted or secured or whatever. They can just change the password right then and there and then run away with it. So, yeah, the security advantages, I went into the first one here, physical loss and misconfigurations. That is you eliminate all of those vulnerabilities and all those attack vectors when you're using a CDE. You integrate into your enterprise accounts. You're already using your centralized ID providers. You can set them up for a least privilege model. You can use vaults for secrets, things like that. All the stuff that you're already doing with all your other platforms and all your other systems, you can now apply that to your dev flow as well. And you secure your supply chain. You can configure it so it only pulls from vetted repos. The images are scanned and everything, and it's just a very secure way to build their environment. So when you are thinking about a platform like this, there are some considerations. What's the distribution model? Is it open source? Is it proprietary? I would assume everybody here, just the nature of where we are, they're going to want something that's open source. Something you can host. You're not reliant on a SaaS provider. Some people, some of the SaaS products out there may suit them, and that's fine for them. So you just have to look at the landscape when you're selecting a CDE platform, because there are options all over the place out there. You want to look at who's hosting it and who's managing it as well. We have, like I said, we have some very highly security conscious customers who they wouldn't dream of running a SaaS or allowing a vendor to support something. They run it in an offline data center. They do all the support, they do all the hosting. So it's a range, right? It's a complete range, everything from SaaS to air-gapped and offline, and everything in between. There are options out there. And how are you getting your new platforms and tools vetted, right? If you have a platform that, like I said in the opening, that has its own wheels, right? It's recreating wheels. Now you have to get all that stuff vetted to be able to be used. But if you have something that just stands on its own and integrates with what you already have, that's just less security certification that you have to do. So the bottom line, these are centrally managed and governed development environments, and that makes them more secure by nature. You're minimizing the threat of supply chain attacks, and it's safe onboarding and offboarding. Think about it, if you have 500 contractors from, who knows where, and now all of a sudden they have all your source code on their laptop, they have all your documentation, and one of them leaves. One of them, absconds in the middle of the night. That could be an attack vector. With a CDE, basically, you want to offboard somebody, you just shut off their access, and they're done. They're out. So that was the basics. Now we'll talk about the maturity model and what we call the golden path. So show of hands, are you guys familiar with the term golden path for developers? Okay, a couple of folks, about half the folks, that's great. So it is a big deal. It sounds kind of weird when you first hear it, like, can it really be that important? But it is, and it has a lot of big benefits too. So the golden path, it can be broken down into these three aspects. It's a prescriptive set of best practices and tools, right? And it helps guide the developers in an efficient way to become more effective, right? That's one thing. It's curated and it's opinionated as well. You have to say, we are going to standardize on this set of tooling. Now, you might let them use a different IDE or something like that, but the core stuff where you're building, it should all be standardized. we can't say as a broad statement or a cookie cutter statement like you should use this OS or this compiler or whatever. Those are decisions you have to make. What works best for your org? What do you think will make the golden path most effective for your devs? And it's a continuous journey, right? It's continuously refined. Every time you iterate on your golden path, it should make the development experience more robust and reduce friction for your devs, right? And then the maturity model. This is a thing that we published a few months ago. It's a slightly tweaked version of a capability maturity model. So it has 5 stages: the ad hoc stage, the foundational, defined, refined, and optimized. As you go through these stages, you're constantly working on your golden path, constantly working on your CDE delivery. Everything's incremental, so each stage is going to build on the previous stage. There's going to be more automation, more self-service, and just a smoother flow from stage to stage to stage. And then the CDE maturity model, or CDE maturity in general, and the golden path, they're intertwined, right? The golden path defines what each stage should do or each stage should be, and then that stage enables the next iteration of the golden path, right? So it's more of just a cycle that keeps going. It's a never-ending cycle. Even once you get to the 5th stage, you're constantly going to be iterating. They're going to be smaller increments, but it's something that is going to always keep moving. So this is it. This is an eye chart. I apologize. We will dig down into this, but I just wanted to show you that these are things that build up on each other. And I mentioned that this is a slightly modified version of a capability maturity model. And what I did, a typical CMM is technology, people, and processes. But I broke the technology into 2 things, one for tooling and one for infrastructure, because they are important to look at on their own. So we have tooling, infrastructure, people, and processes. We will dig into each one of these in the next few slides. However, at the end, I'll have a list of resources where you can download the paper that we published on this model. So, considerations for each stage. Whenever you are either embarking on a stage or you're completing a stage and you're in between, you always want to understand what your current state is. Even if it's a mess when you're getting started, you want to know what that mess is. And then as you move along in the maturity model, you're having more, breakthroughs or more traction or more adoption, and that can bring its own problems. So you want to align your technology, your dev experience, and your processes for each stage. You want to have them sort of balanced, and you want to progress them all equally as they go along. And you want to have incremental milestones. That could be milestones for each stage or milestones within the stage itself, right? You guys know your devs the best. You know what they're going to need to get to the end of a stage. So you have to set it up to so they can do small changes incrementally. So stage 0, ad hoc. This is essentially anybody who's pre-CDE, right? These are the people who are looking at it and thinking of a POC. So the current state, and now I present a very worst case scenario here, of course. I mean, I would hope even if you don't have a CDE, you're in a better state than this, but this is just a worst case scenario. So there are no standards, or vice versa, there are many standards, right? So, if you have 14 standards, do you really have standards? Who knows? Things are inconsistent, and there's friction at every step for the devs. This is that map I showed at the opening where, you're basically handing them half of a treasure map on their first day, and it's up to them to figure out what they need, and who they need to talk to, what they need to get installed to actually do their work. And the golden path in this stage doesn't exist. Things are risky. You have an attrition risk, security risks, things like that, and it can be very expensive, especially if your folks are using shadow IT. If they're spinning up VMs with GPUs on them and leaving them run 24/7, I mean, That's buku bucks right there. So the goals for stage 0, you should be able to inventory and assess where you are. And you should be able to select a pilot team for your CDE pilot. Now this team could be the team that has the best abstraction or the best standard out of all of them, or they have the easiest use case, or, you know, it's really up to the platform team, you know, as people who are providing a new platform to determine that. And you have to realize that at this stage there's a division between the dev's workflow and technical debt. There might be, you know, my friend Carl, who, he's not here right now, I thought he was going to be here, but he has a phrase that I love. He says load-bearing technical debt, right? You know, so you have like, however you want to define your technical debt, that if you try to eliminate that, the house of cards falls down. So, you know, stage 0, you're taking a long, hard look in the mirror, so to speak. So stage 1, this is what we call the foundational stage. And the goals of this stage are to set up a proof of concept and a minimally viable platform, right? Something that can be used, but it's far from perfect at this point. It should be on a supportable infrastructure. It might not be on your, you know, top tier, you know, internal cloud, brand new machines, this and that. It might be on some repurposed hardware, or it might just be on VMs, or who knows where it is, but it should be something that the platform team can support, right? So we're getting rid of the shadow IT. We're getting rid of, you know, people SSHing into each other's computers and whatever they're doing all over the place. And really, stage 1 should have one project or one team on the CDE. There should just be one pilot team. And the golden path now, it's starting to form, right? You're in the foundational stage of your golden path. Even at this point, small iterations and scoring are key. So you have to start thinking about how are you going to measure these changes, right? And the smaller something is, the easier it is to measure, and the easier it is to score. And you're starting to look at standardization. So, you know, you have those 14 standards out there. You've grabbed the best one, say, and now you want to iterate that until it's perfect, and there's no technical debt, and people can jump on that project, jump on the CD, and be coding immediately. That's kind of the end state that you want. There are some risks with the early stages of CDE. If you go too fast, it becomes unmeasurable, right? If you were taking these big leaps and people were saying, oh, I want that, I'm going to move my stuff over there right now, it's a little too much to measure. And they're probably bringing technical debt with them, right? They're probably bringing technical debt into the system, which is going to cause a compounding effect that there is going to be technical debt with the CDE itself, not only with the use cases. And there's a risk here that if you stagnate at this stage, that you're effectively going to backslide to stage 0 because, and I use the number 14, and can anybody guess why I use the number 14? For standards? Yes, right? So, you know, if you have 14 standards and now you have a CDE and you stagnate at stage 1, you're in an XKCD cartoon. So, you know, it's just another abstraction, another way to do things, and it's not going to be an enterprise-wide thing. So, stage 2. This is where the CDE starts to be like a real thing. The goals for this stage are to get it on a supported and integrated platform, right? The platform in stage 1 was just something that was supportable. Do you take your stage 1 CDE and integrate it into all your other systems? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe you knock it down. Maybe you knock it down and start over because you want to get rid of some of the mistakes that you made. It's really up to you. Everything with a CDE should be declarative, though. Even the CDE itself, you should be able to declare in YAML files, config files, and database dumps, and be able to reproduce it, ad nauseum. And not just the workspaces, the actual system itself. Conversion patterns are starting to emerge in stage 2. You know, you've gone through stage 1, you've iterated that pilot team's workflows. Maybe you got 1 or 2 environments for that pilot team in stage 1. They're happy. You have a conversion pattern that's emerging that you can apply to other use cases and other development teams. And now, stage 2, the goal is to have multiple projects and then alternatives for, options for alternative use cases. So CDEs are not just for devs. You can put any sort of technical worker on a CDE, you know, data analysts, SREs, DBAs, you name it. Anybody who needs specialized tooling, specialized network connections, and you need that consistent experience, they're a good candidate for a CDE conversion. And some CDs are out there, though, like Coder, for example, just to plug us a little bit, our workspaces can be any OS, right? We can do Windows, we can do Mac, we can do Linux. So you could even get some of your Windows devs into your CDE if you wanted. So now, stage 2, the golden path, we have guided self-service for your devs, right? The devs are working with the platform team to say, we need to get this tool installed, or we need more disk space, or we need to connect to this network, and the platform team's going to fulfill that for them and change those declarations and modify those declarations to suit what the devs are needing. Your DevX scoring model should be pretty well established at this point. That is something that is always going to, kind of like the golden path itself, the scoring model could be tweaked and iterated as you go along, but it should be pretty well established. And once again, we can't tell you what to do in your scoring model. That's something that you have to, you know your devs best, you can establish that. And you're reaching a milestone here in the golden path where there's 0 setup for the devs. They log into Coder, I'm stuck in sales mode here. They log into the CDE, they click a few buttons, and within minutes or seconds even, they have their development environment and it's ready to go. There's no configuration or anything on their part. At this point, you have to start thinking about scaling the CDE because you have a few teams on here, you have multiple use cases. Some of them may be non-developer oriented, but you're starting to see some patterns here emerging, and you want to grow your CDE and you want to do it effectively. So at this point, you absolutely need to identify a process champion. So if your CDE is sort of a ground-up effort, if it's the devs saying, hey, we want to standardize everything and we want to do it with this CDE, now is the time to look for somebody in leadership to back you up, right? To say, these guys are doing a good thing, they're doing the right thing, and we need to get more people involved in it. If it's a top-down approach, like if you're at a bigger company and the C-level people say, hey, we need this CDE thing, they start the pilot, they need to get other groups involved. Your process champion may be, say like a staff or a principal developer who is, on one of the CDE teams or the CDE only teams at this point. So it's just depending on where you're coming from, you're going to need to have somebody with some juice to get your additional teams on there. And you're starting to define your functional goals here, both short-term and long-term. And by that, it's what do you want to do? How do you want to achieve a better NPS, or how do you want to achieve a better scoring? How do you want to improve your productivity? How can we do that? What things can we do to reach that long-term goal here? And now you can actually start calculating your ROI on it. You can model the productivity and the gains that you're making at this point, because you're going to have a critical mass on there, or a maybe statistically significant sample of your devs are going to be on the CDE by that point. So when we get into stage 3, now this is where it really starts getting good, right? The goals of stage 3, the CDE is the standard. It should be whenever a new person comes in, they should be able to just, a few clicks and go. Whenever a new project spins up, say somebody comes up with a new product they want to develop and sell, it should be built on a CDE before anything else. So maybe CDE should be the first choice, maybe not the standard, maybe the first choice at this point. And you're starting to look at those, the three S's, the security, the stability, and the scalability of not only the CDE, but your dev teams as well. Like I said, the big advantage of CDEs is they can help you ship more secure code, more stable code at scale, right? And the platform team in stage 3 is going to start delegating. They're going to start stepping away from the CDE itself, and they're just going to be treating it as a platform that they take care of, right? They're going to delegate some of the tasks to like the lead devs on each team. They're not going to be doing as much fulfillment. They're just going to be focused on, you know, making sure the platform's running and backed up and reliable. And at this point, the golden path, like I said, we have guided self-fulfillment. You know, the devs can make decisions on what they need, and then those can be fulfilled by the platform team, but there are other ways of fulfilling that we can talk about too. Your DevX scoring is getting more and more refined as you go along. And we have tiered workspaces, meaning, I don't know if you can read it here in the infrastructure section. It says tiered multi-cloud, multi-platform infrastructure controlled by the platform engineering team. So tiered workspaces are, you know, it can be as simple as, you know, your sort of lighter devs, say you have, you know, some JavaScript devs or something, you know, they're on CPU only nodes, they get a gig of RAM, something small, whatever, versus your AI ML developers who need, you know, 64 cores and, you know, a ton of RAM and GPU cores and all that other stuff. So you have places for these different use cases to land. You have, you know, you have a non-homogeneous hardware selections. So DevX scoring, like I said, this is not my forte. My coworker Nikki right here, he's going to be doing a webinar that you can tune into very soon on DevX scoring with DX. So that'll be really interesting. And I'll actually have a link to our webinar section in the resources if you want to keep your eye on that. But you know your devs the best. You're going to have to develop the model, but you can look at these three overarching categories: the technical performance, the developer sentiment, and then the organizational value. And whatever the components are that make those up for you guys, you know, you can iterate on your scoring model. You know, right here, just some of the samples. Technical performance, we have time to first commit, time to 10th PR. That's you know, those are two very different things, but very representative of what devs can do. And reproducibility. How quickly can you reproduce an environment to, say, you know, work on a PR or something, right? With a CD, it's like instant. The developer sentiment, you know, NPS scoring, their productivity ratio, you know, how much can they self-serve? Basically, how happy are they using this developer environment? And then organizational value is what gets realized by all these other improvements. You know, what's the adoption rate, compliance, adherence, things like that. Like I said, not my forte, but tune in next month with Nikki and DX, and they'll have a whole big talk about that. I'm going to do a time check. We're at 37 minutes. We'll be out of here on time. So, stage 4, optimize. This is the final stage of the CDE, but it's a what's Simon Sinek say about an infinite game, right? You know, stage 4 is an infinite game. It's a never-ending stage. So the goals here is the CDE should be the default, and I put an asterisk next to default because there always are going to be corner cases or edge cases where you're not going to be able to put them onto the CDE. So you can't mandate that everybody uses it, but it should be, you know, very highly critical mass. Over 90% of your devs should be using the CDE by stage 4. At this point, the devs can do their own workspace declarations with some sort of infrastructure as code motion. We use Terraform, so you know the devs should be able to write their own Terraform to configure their own workspaces, to select different hardware, you name it, different clouds, multi-cloud stuff, whatever. And support and integration are SRE motions at this point, right? This is an established platform. your SREs or your platform engineers are treating it just as, you know, a service to keep up. They're not in the day-to-day with the devs helping them configure stuff. They're removed from that, and they're just making sure it's a reliable system that your devs have. And the golden path for this stage, it's fully established, meaning, you know, you should know where you are and where you're going with your golden path at this point. However, it is an infinite game. Right? Everything should be pipelinable, and this goes right along with devs declaring their own workspace declarations. You know, there should be some sort of a pipeline, so a dev can say, I want to try adding whatever, you know, adding some alternate network paths or some alternate hardware or whatever. They should be able to put that in a declaration, put it into a pipeline, and have a, you know, have some sort of a CI/CD motion for the CDE itself. And then you'll have a tiered self-service and self-fulfillment model at this point. And by that I mean you have at least 3 levels of self-service and self-fulfillment. You're less technical users. Let's say you put some business analysts or something on here to run Superset or something like that. They're not going to be able to write their own, or they probably don't even want to write their own templates. You know, they're going to either go to the platform team or maybe a lead dev on another team to get some help to say, hey, you know, here's this piece of software, we want to have it installed, we want to use it. So there is going to be a request and fulfillment cycle for that tier. The mid tier is a multiple choice infra and self-service dependencies. So this could be, you know, you could give the devs a choice of, say, you know, a CPU only node or a node with GPUs, and they could use like a dev container or dev container spec to spin up the workspace. So now they sort of have they have a couple of cookie cutters to pick for the hardware itself, but now they can define their own dependencies like in a dev container spec or whatever sort of declarative spec you're using. And then the third tier is the one I described earlier, where the devs are doing everything. They're declaring their own hardware, they're fulfilling their own dependencies, they're completely rolling. And if you think about like a DevOps loop, at the end of a planning phase, before you start coding on the next sprint, you know, the devs could go in and adjust their templates to have the newest version of the library or some other package that you need or whatever for this next sprint. So now, when everybody embarks on their coding tasks, everything's there and it's ready to go. So the bottom line on CD maturity and the golden path, incremental adoption and scoring, it matters, right? The smaller steps you can do, the easier they're going to be scored. And you want to keep scoring throughout the whole lifetime of the CDE, even after you've reached stage 4. And the golden path is key. It's a way, if you just look at the golden path and say, how can I make my devs happy by removing friction in their job? I mean, that's, it pays off in multiples. And adoption in the golden path are journeys. Like I said, they're infinite games. You're always going to be incrementing, even after you've hit stage 4. You know, there's always going to be some incremental improvements that you can make. So, trends, we got about 3 minutes here. This, I don't know if you guys are familiar with these Gartner hype cycles. This is the platform engineering one from last year. They haven't released the 2025 one yet, but CDEs are right there, right? So they're still kind of on the innovation trigger phase. They're getting into the peak of inflated expectations phase, and then it's going to be the reality is going to set in for people. So if you haven't adopted a CDE yet, you're not exactly behind the industry, but now's a good time to get ahead of your competitors, because CDEs are a strategic asset, right? It's the title of this talk. If you look at what a CDE can do, the stuff here on the left side, you know, what can you do today with a CDE? We've talked about all these things, but once you get into those advanced stages, you can start looking at what can the CDE do for me tomorrow, right? That's where the strategic aspect of this comes in. These are just some things we picked out of thin air. Green software engineering, AI augmented development, things like that. You know your industry, you know your products. This is for you to fill in, not for me to say what it is or what it isn't. So overall, the CDs enhance DevX and security, period. That's like the lowest hanging fruit out of this. If you implement a CDE, and even if you're not doing all the greatest tiering and everything like we talked about in the later stages, you are going to have a more secure developer environment, and your devs are going to be happier. The adoption is a journey, and it's a never-ending journey. You're constantly going to be iterating even after you've hit stage 4. And CDs are a strategic differentiator. If you can hire somebody from a top school, have them come in on their first day, and they're writing code and committing immediately, they're going to stick around, right? They're not going to get frustrated and walk out the door. So we're right at 45 minutes now. Oh, no, actually, we're a little bit under because I started my clock late. Anyway, resources. These are links. These are no good to you right now, but I'll have a QR code up for the slides, so you can grab the slides if you want. Coder.com, we have a really active blog. We publish a lot of white papers. We have a really top-tier set of docs. And then we also have a fairly active YouTube channel. Hopefully it'll get more and more active as we go along. I did a CD 101 video series on YouTube. So if you want to start talking about this stuff with maybe a business manager or your C-level folks, you can have them watch that, and it's like a nice little cartoon. It describes what CDs are and how to select a CD and things like that. And then we have some white papers that are really handy: Introducing CDs Enterprise, State of the CDE Report, the Enterprise CD Buyer's Guide, and then finally the Maturity Model, which is what this talk is based on. It's about, like a 25 or 30 page white paper that goes into a lot more detail than I had time to go into today. So if you want the slides and you want those links, that's the QR code on your left. And if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, that's the QR code on the right. I will leave those up, and I will turn it over to you guys and ask you if you have any questions. Do we have a mic, actually? Because they are live streaming this. Yeah. There you go.
Hey, I like your presentation, and
Thank you.
I'm the Senior Director of Horizon Surgical Systems. We are making surgical robots.
Okay.
And because we are a medical devices manufacturer, I have questions for you on two sides.
Okay.
One is the compliance. Using the CD in the process of the whole SDLC, do you see any problems, or do you see you have any successful clients that in the medical devices company industry that they're using the CD and it's actually streamlined their workflow, but they don't get any problem with FDA? Mm-hmm. That's number one. Number two is that we are dealing with the hardware. So do you see the CD can help with not only for those companies, meaning on the cloud, but also for companies like us, dealing mm-hmm. with hardware, doing the deployment, doing the testing on hardware, like a hardware in a loop? Mm-hmm. That's my two questions. Thank you.
Yeah. So I don't know if we have any medical device companies right now. However, we do have a lot of companies who are in regulated industries, finance, and government and things like that. So a CD will definitely help you with those compliance checks, because now you don't have to go out and to every single developer's machine and make sure that it's in compliance, right? Everybody's building off of this one declaration. You can spin that up and say, hey, is it compliant or is it not? What do we need to change to make it compliant? You change it in the declaration, and then the next time your developers spin up their workspace, they have all those changes, right? As far as connecting directly to the hardware, we have a way to do it right now that effectively you can attach. Remember I said you can do like a multi-platform or multi-cloud type CDE. We have a way now where you can actually have your laptop connect as a provisioner to your CDE. So if you want to hook a JTAG up or something, you can that way. It's clunky. However, that is, a lot of folks are asking for that, embedded use cases, and it is something that is, I don't know, is it on the roadmap right now, or is it coming soon?
We're adding USB forwarding.
Okay, USB for
So
web,
you have a remote instance and forward their local kind of USB
Yeah.
serial devices into
yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that's on the roadmap for this year, right? Yeah, so that, I mean, at least for us, I don't know about what the other folks are doing, but for us, that'll be a capability we have this year.
Thank you. So, small follow-up question on that topic is, how deep the CDE, for example, from Coder, can emulate on the cloud? Is it down to OS, like the kernel, or even down to, let's say, some settings in the BIOS even?
I mean, the workspaces can be just about anything. They can be, you know, they can be a container, they can be a pod, they can be a deployment, they can be a complete namespace, they can be a VM if you want. So, I mean, it's all virtual, right? So if you could emulate those, like let's say you're going to use a VM, if your platform would allow the CDE to connect to the VM provider and change those kind of BIOS settings in the VM, then yeah, you absolutely could do it. But for hardware, I don't know what kind of hardware you're using, but you know, if it's something where you're directly connected to a workstation and you can send those signals to the hardware to make those changes, then yeah, I don't see why not. You know, the thing I always tell folks is, like for Coder anyway, we use Terraform. So on the platform side, if you can do it in Terraform, you can do it in Coder. But we're also OS agnostic on the workspace side. So if you can do it in your OS, you can do it in Coder, right? The OS that you're using.
Thank you.
Any other questions or? Anybody else? Okay, cool. Well, thanks everybody for coming. I'm really glad you guys stuck around because I was really worried that there wasn't going to be anybody here because it is like the last thing right before the keynote and it's like across the way from all the critical mass. So I thank you all. And this was the first time I gave this talk. So hopefully I'll have a chance to give it a lot more. So if I stumbled over a few things or got a little confused, thanks for bearing with me on that. So thank you.